What's up, everybody? Been playing Witch Doctor this new season, Season 11, and finally got my Legacy of Nightmares build mostly put together. And a lot of people have always been asking what the build is if I had a video, so here's the video. I'm going to go over a few different variations of the build and kind of what you can do as you progress with it. There's multiple variations and not necessarily one is the best. It depends on your group and your survivability and what kind of greater rifts you want to run. Basically, go over the skills first, and then I'll go over the gear, and then I'll go over the different options and how to play the build. This passive here, first I'll go over the passives, is not the one that you originally want to use. I'm wearing a Hellfire necklace that gives Confidence Ritual, so that's actually what you would have in place of Swampland Attunement. Once you get a Hellfire, you want it to have either Swampland Attunement or any of the other four, and then add Swampland Attunement to it. So Confidence Ritual, Creeping Death, Gruesome Feast, and Rush of Essence. What Confidence Ritual does is gives you 25% additional damage. Creeping Death makes your Haunt and Locust Swarm last almost forever. Gruesome Feast, when you're healed by a health globe, you gain 10% of your max mana and 10% intelligence. Stacks 5 times, that's 50% intelligence. And it heals your mana, which is really nice. And then Rush of Essence. Your spirit spells return 100 mana over 10 seconds. Your Haunt and your Spirit Barrage is really the ones that are important with this. Now, this stacks, so every time you cast Spirit Barrage, you're getting the 10 mana a second. So you end up getting tons, and when you have a ton of attack speed, you're getting a ton of mana per second. So it's really important to have this. Now, doesn't matter where you put these, this is how I put them. Haunt, Poison Spirit. You want this for sure, 20% more damage to anything that's haunted. Soul Harvest, you definitely want Languish. What you do with this is you harvest the souls. You gain 3% intelligence, as well as 10% armor. It stacks normally to 5. If you're wearing a Sacred Harvester, it'll stack to 10, which is a shitload. That would be 30% intelligence and 50% armor, and that's a lot. Another one would be your Spirit Barrage. This is the next skill. This is really important. Doesn't really matter which rune you use on this, as long as I put it on Phlebotomize. Some people could use the Spirit as Willing, but you really don't need it. The extra life on hit is better. I'll explain why it doesn't really matter which one, other than having that life on hit when we go over the gear. Locust Swarm, you're going to want Cloud of Insects. This deals 25% reduced, or enemies deal 25% reduced damage when they're affected by the Locust Swarm. And then this is your variation skill. When you're first starting, I recommend having Spirit Walk as well as Horrify. The Horrify that I choose is one that gives you armor. So Horrify, Frightening Aspect, gives you 50% armor. And then Spirit Walk, either Severance or Jaunt, move speed or increased duration. Really important when you're first starting to get used to the build. I don't recommend going with the Sacrifice Grasp of the Dead until you've gotten used to the build more and you have better gear. And the way this works is you pop a Grasp of the Dead on the ground. When you kill stuff, there's a 70% chance that it's going to summon a zombie dog. You can have 3 zombie dogs. Then when you have those, you sacrifice them. Each time you sacrifice, when you get 20% increased damage for 5 seconds. And then if more things die, you can sacrifice them. You can have up to 5 stacks of this, which means 100% increased damage. It's a ton of extra damage. However, if you're not running with a proper group or struggling to play the build, I don't recommend using this. You're still going to have enough damage to do lower greater rifts without sacrifice and Grasp of the Dead, but it's really, really nice combo like this. Now, if you're playing solo, it's going to change a little bit. But I'm mostly going to go over this as the group play. Now, as far as gear goes, Optimal is not a Blind Faith helmet. Optimal would be either a Mask of Jerem or Andariel's Visage. This Andes is really, really great, but unfortunately it's not ancient. This is what you want your Andes to look like. Cold skills, int, attack speed, Unfortunately, it always will have increased fire damage taken and Spirit Barrage. You don't need a socket, and you can get crit chance on this. Some people might roll the int into crit chance. It's really up to you. I would keep it just like this. If this was ancient, this would be my helmet. I would be happy the way it was. Now, shoulders does not really matter. The Skeleton King shoulders that give you that possibility of an extra death are real nice, but use your best shoulders. You don't need area damage, you don't need cooldown, so go for pure survivability stats on there. Chest piece, you need an Aquila's. You want the lowest rating on your secondary skill. You want a 90%. Mine's a 92, but it's a really nice chest. I got the int vit and reduced damage from elites. That is the optimal rolls that you would have. Amulet, you can use any amulet, but preferably you want a Hellfire, and you want it to have one of the 4 passive skills that you need for this build, so that you can add Swampland Attunement, or have Swampland Attunement on your Hellfire. Unfortunately, this one didn't roll a crit chance, but that's okay. I still have a decent amount of crit chance, and it was worth dropping my other perfect amulet that did have crit chance for this. It does have average damage, so it's not a bad amulet. Gloves, you want Frostburns. For a while I was using my best gloves. They were Gladiator gauntlets, but Frostburns are great. Unfortunately, these don't have either attack speed or vit. Your choice on that. I would eventually want to have attack speed, crit damage, crit chance, and you want to make sure that they have high secondary stat, the 20% increased cold damage, as well as they have the chance to freeze enemies. Your belt, when you're in a group, you want to be running Witching Hour, and sometimes when you're solo as well. It depends how you build. I'll go over the solo after we go over this, but Witching Hour has that crit damage and attack speed. Bracers, you got to have Lacumbas. These are really, really important. Cold skills, int, vit, and crit. Unfortunately, mine don't have vit yet. Still haven't been able to get a pair. And these things roll 6% increased or reduced damage for each stack of Soul Harvest you have. So if you're running your base amount, that'd be 30% damage reduction. If you're running a Sacred Harvester, that would be 60% damage reduction, which is really, really good. Rings, obviously, you need a Wailing Host and a Litany. Both you want Ancient. All these you want Ancient, because this set here is well, I guess I should have showed this as the first thing, but this is the base of the set. While this is your only set item bonus, every Ancient item you have will increase your damage dealt by 100% and reduce your damage taken by 4%. I now have 13 Ancients, so I'm adding 1,300 damage and a ton of damage reduction. It's like 52 or something like that. I don't know how to do math. But you want these Ancient. I just finally got this Wailing Host today in Ancient form on Seasons. And keep in mind, this build does not need all Ancients to make it work. I think I started playing it with only 4 or 5 Ancients, and it was still a strong build. Sure, you can't be pushing in the 90s, but it was working in the 70s just fine with only 4 or 5 Ancients. So, these are my rings. I would say you want main stat, crit chance, crit damage, or average damage, crit chance, crit damage. You could have attack speed on there. Basically, you just want damage on your rings. Pants, really important. Swampland Waders. They need to have cold skill damage on them, int, vit, and preferably armor. But these ones rolled like 16% cold skills. I could have either rolled the armor onto them or got 4% more cold damage. I went with more cold damage. But the secondary on this isn't that important. The sacrifice dealing extra damage, it's not that important, but it's there, and you are sacrificing things. Offhand, this is a necessity. Gazing Demise. This thing here, Spirit Barrage, gains the Phantasm rune. Each active Phantasm increases the damage of Spirit Barrage by 47%. So what Phantasm is this little guy spinning around. Now, this is considered a pet. So Mask of Jerem doubles the damage of these. Keep that in mind. The Phantasm is counted as a pet. Boots, really important, is the Illusory Boots. If you don't have Illusory Boots, you're pretty much going to have to run the Spirit Walk version of this build. I had to run this until I got some Ancient Illusory Boots. I had to run the Spirit Walk. But once you get these, you can probably drop your Spirit Walk and go with the sacrifice version. What you want on this is Spirit Barrage damage and Invit and armor, preferably, over the Yalrez. Oh, on the Gazing Demise, what's really important on this is it doesn't normally roll crit chance. But you're going to want crit chance, and you're going to want Spirit Barrage damage. So this is the hardest thing to get in your build as a perfect roll. Getting that crit chance and Spirit Barrage damage is not very easy to do, and I still haven't gotten. I found a better version of this, but it ended up having less Spirit Barrage damage on the bottom, so it really wasn't worth using. Now, hopefully I get one with Spirit Barrage and crit chance, but definitely the hardest piece. Similar to like the Shadow set build, the Impale build, getting that Holy Point shot. It's going to be a while till you get a great one. And then finally the weapon. You've got 3 different choices for weapons here. Vooz Juicer, Sacred Harvester, or the Barber. The core of this build is based around the Barber. This is the most important one. You either have to wear the Barber or it has to be in your cube. One or the other. You can't do it without the Barber. The way this works is instead of dealing direct damage, your Spirit Barrage now accumulates on the target. When you stop casting, it explodes for up to 250% of the accumulated damage to all enemies within 15 yards. I didn't quite understand how this worked at first because you're not really channeling your skill. You don't really stop casting because you're putting these guys out. But turns out I'm gonna post a link in the YouTube video to a Reddit thread that kind of explains this build a bit in the detailed aspects of it. But it turns out when you say cast 3 of these 3, you can only have 3 out at a time. When you cast the 4th one, the first one you cast is going to blow up, and it's going to deal that damage to everything in the area. Now, what's confusing about this is I couldn't figure out why I was able to kill packs of mobs so fast, but not kill solo mobs, even if they're the same type. If there was 10 of them, they'd die almost instantly. If there was 1 of them, I couldn't kill it. But what it is when you have one of these out there, it's accumulating damage. If it's hitting 20 mobs, all that damage is now accumulated, and when it blows up, it's dealing up to 250% of all that damage. So if it hits 20 mobs and then blows up, it's doing all 20 mobs worth of damage multiplied to everything in the area. So if you are only hitting 1 mob, it's only accumulating a little bit of damage, so when it blows up, it doesn't really do much. So this build is really bad against Rift Guardians, but really good against big packs. You can do good damage to elites as long as there's a bunch of mobs around to help spread that damage around. It's pretty interesting, and that's definitely a must-have. This is what I've been wearing mostly till I tried out the Vooz Juicer, and I was cubing the Sacred Harvester. This lets you stack Soul Harvest up to 10 times. Which will then give you 60% damage reduction from your bracers, as well as 30% 30% intelligence and 50% armor from your Soul Harvest. So Sacred Harvester is really, really good, especially if you're struggling in the beginning with toughness. Now, Vooz Juicer is the other option. This is for the most damage, and the reason why is because it gives you Spirit Barrage damage, up to 60%. Mine's unfortunately the lowest, 45%. It can go up to 60. And this is actually my lowest damage version of all these weapons, but it ends up making more damage because of the Spirit Barrage damage on it. It also lets you gain the effects of Phlebotomize and the Spirit is Willing rune, which are your 2 options you can choose from. So it really doesn't matter which one you choose as your Spirit Barrage if you're doing it. But you want to have cold, so really your only option is those 2. I recommend staying with Phlebotomize. So basically, that's all the gear. Let me show you the cube. You want to make sure you have the Barber cubed, or wearing it. You want to make sure you have Mask of Jerem. Pets deal 100% increased damage. These are considered pets, so that's why you wear it. But they're not based on your attack speed. They don't tick faster based on attack speed, so Tasker gloves don't do anything with this build. And then, of course, Ring of Emptiness. You deal 300% increased damage to enemies affected by both your Haunt and Locust Swarm. This is very, very important, this ring. That triples your damage output. Another option would be wearing Mask of Jerem and cubing the Ancient Parthan Defenders. I know in the very high greater rifts, they're doing that because of that toughness that you get from Ancient Parthian defenders. And you're only losing out on some of the cold skill damage from Andes when you do it like that. Keep that in mind. Now, the way you would play this build, I don't have a group with me, so I'm not actually going to show the build in work, is you need to have a barb and a monk in your group. If you don't, you're probably going to die. Now, you want to stick with the monk. The monk will keep you alive. You want to stand in his inner sanctuary, and you shouldn't die if you're in it. If you are dying, then you're probably doing something wrong, or the monk and the barb are doing something wrong. I'm able to stay alive now. We've done a 101 greater rift, and I don't have much toughness. As you can see, my life pool is 807, which is not that high. It used to be lower because now I have Vit on this weapon. The average damage was very low, so I ended up re-rolling the average damage instead. But the way you want to play this is you get into a safe spot with your monk, then you're going to want to pop a locust swarm right away. First thing you do is pop that locust swarm. Or actually, soul harvest. I take that back. You want to pop the soul harvest, harvest the souls, gives you that that toughness, gives you some more damage and int. Then you want to pop your locust swarm. This one takes the longest to spread around, and then you want to sit there and cast some haunts. Depending on how big of a pack it is, depends on how long you want to cast haunts. This is only letting out one haunt per. They will automatically target things that aren't haunted. So you could aim at one thing, haunt it 10 times, but 10 enemies are going to be haunted. When they die, the haunt will move to the next enemy. But it's important to get enough haunts out there. Don't try to start dealing damage right away, because if they're not haunted and locust swarm, they're not going to take much damage. Once you've got enough of those out there, you're going to pop a Grasp of the Dead on the ground, and then you're going to just start casting your Spirit Barrage. And things are going to start dying. When they start dying, you're going to see some dogs up here, 3 at a time. If they cap out at 3, then you're going to sacrifice them and keep doing damage. You notice that something doesn't seem to be taking much damage. Make sure you recast maybe a locust swarm and cast some more haunts maybe, and then give it another try. Put your Grasp of the Dead down and just spam your skill. There is some crazy theory crafting and mechanics about this where it's not always best to just hold it down, but your best bet in general is to just hold the skill down and blow them up as fast as you can. What's really important is your gems. I forgot to go over that. Bane of the Trapped, Pain Enhancer, and Enforcer gem. The Enforcer gem increases the damage of your pets. This is considered a pet, so that's why you want that. Bane of the Trapped increases your damage against everything that's near you, so keep that in mind, or anything that's slowed, or whatever, any control impairing effect, you're going to be doing extra damage. And Pain Enhancer, this is really important, very, very important in a group right here. And what's also really important is that the monk in your party has bleed on his weapon. If you look at any of the 4-player parties, the monk, and sometimes and usually the barb, also has bleed on one of their weapons. So the reason why, they don't run Pain Enhancer, but if they have bleed on their weapon, every time the monk's doing his attacks, he has a very large chance to cause them to bleed. So the entire pack of mobs is going to be bleeding most of the time, and you gain 3% increased attack speed for every enemy bleeding within 20 yards. So this, if you are in a big pack of mobs and you start attacking them and open up your inventory, you'll see your damage fluctuate. Like I'll be anywhere from like 2.5 million to 16 million DPS, depending on how many enemies are around, how much stuff I've sacrificed, and how many orbs have been picked up to give me more int as well. So it's really important to have that monk have attack or bleed damage on his weapon. Now, where else was I at? I think I've covered how to play it in a group like that. You run in, you soul harvest, you locust swarm, you haunt up, you pull grasp, and then you kill stuff and sacrifice, and just do that until they die. And try to make sure you're always with that monk in the inner sanctuary. Now, if you want to run this build solo, The main difference is this belt right here, Belt of Transcendence. You summon a fetish sycophant when you hit with a mana spender. This is a mana spender. So every time you hit with this, or haunt, or anything, you summon a little pet. And what you use is those pets to tank your damage. You stand back and let the enemies fight your pets. Rather than being right up next to them and in the thing. You have your pets doing that. If you look at the leaderboards for solo, I've only done an 80. That's as high as I've tried. I don't really enjoy playing solo. But you can inspect the solo leaderboards and see what they are doing differently. Some of them wear Mask of Jerem and cube the belt, and then wear a Witching Hour. Some of them wear Andes, cube the Mask of Jerem, and wear the Belt of Transcendence. It really just depends, but for the most part, what you're going to see is the Barber in your main hand or the Sacred Harvester, whichever one is better. That's going to be your combo of weapons. I don't think you're going to see anyone solo pushing without the Sacred Harvester because it just gives so much toughness. And, oh, let me show you the other two skills. Since you're not going to be running Sacrifice anymore, you're going to be running Spirit Walk. Most people run Jaunt because it lasts for 3 seconds. And then you run Piranhas, Piranado. Now, Piranado sucks up enemies and groups them all up for you. Let me show you here, Piranhas, Piranado. And it's real nice. It lasts for 4 seconds. So with this build, you would go in, you'd Spirit Walk in there, get your stacks up, give them get your stacks with your Soul Harvest, give them a nice little Locust Swarm. Then you'd want to step back, haunt them up a bit, get your fetishes going. Then they'll be tanking. Then you'd want to use your Piranado to group them all up, and when they're grouped up, you just spam your Spirit Barrage, and then they die. It works pretty damn good. Use your Piranado to help with the crowd control and groupings. Use your fetishes to keep the damage off of you. And it's a really nice build. It works really good. I just don't really ever play solo. I don't enjoy the frustration of the RNG of the rifts, and I feel like the game is always out to fuck me over. So keep that in mind. It can be frustrating. But yeah, I think I covered everything. If I missed anything, let me know. Oh, Paragon. I mean, assuming that your Paragon 800 plus, I just hit 800, you'd have everything maxed out anyways. Right now, I'm putting it into Vit because I don't have very good survivability. I could probably put it into Int and see what that's like, but since I'm missing the Vit on my bracers, I made up for it in my Paragon points. Now that I have Vit on my weapon, maybe I could get away with dropping it off my Paragon and putting it into my Int. But you don't need max mana with this build, so that's not too important. You also don't need cooldown reduction with this build, so that's not important. Area damage is also not important. And, I mean, resource cost reduction is okay, but it's not any sort of priority. Really, you want to have your attack speed, crit chance, and crit damage maxed out as fast as possible. And that's pretty much it. Don't forget to comment if you have any questions. And like the video, we're also streaming live 24/7, Twitch TV/StreamerHouse. Me and Jesus are playing Diablo, so you can come check us out. And thanks for watching, guys.